Bleeding purple and gold. From the heart of Los Angeles, this is the LakersNation.com podcast with your host, Trevor Lane.
Welcome to the show. As always, we are powered by CLNS Media and LakersNation.com, your home for everything Lakers. On today's show, this is actually our 100th episode of the Lakers Nation podcast. I can't believe that we've been doing this for 100 episodes already. It really flew by. Thank you to everybody who's been listening since day one. And I figured today, rather than spend all of our time getting nostalgic and looking at the past 99 episodes, we would look forward to the future. It feels like there's a new day dawning here in Los Angeles. So I've brought in Keith Smith of Real GM and Celtics blog. He's a salary cap expert, and we're going to look at what the Lakers' options are moving forward, some of the moves that they've made this summer as well, because this is a really exciting time in Lakers basketball, of course, now with LeBron James on board and so many young pieces in the fold. Keith, thanks so much for joining me for this episode.
Absolutely, and I didn't know that 100. That's awesome. I've muddled through like 30 with multiple hiatuses. So congrats to you guys for getting to 100. That's big time.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly it's gone by, and I go back and I listen to like the first episodes, and I can't imagine what I'm saying. It sounds so bad. So I'm sure when I hit 200, I'm going to go back and listen to this one and be like, oh, I'm terrible.
Yeah, we're always our harshest critics on those things too. So I know what you mean.
Absolutely. So the most recent Lakers news that I wanted to dig into, a little bit of a surprise signing, Michael Beasley on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. What's your take on adding him? Is this a good addition? I thought he actually had a pretty decent season last year for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, initially you want to kind of laugh and be like, hey, but if it's a circus, you might as well call it what it is and go all in, right? I mean, they've definitely added some characters to the roster. But when you get into the basketball part of this, I really like it. I think this is a good move. You mentioned it. He had a really nice year for the Knicks last season. I think Beasley has realized, and I think teams have realized, what he is now. Right, he is a guy. Get him the ball, let him shoot. He's probably never going to be the most efficient guy in the world, but he can be a bench forward, a bench scorer in a lot of ways. I think he has become what we all hoped Jeff Green might be one day. When it was transitioned out of Jeff Green's not going to be a starter full time, but Beasley is even despite all the BEs stuff and be easy and all that stuff in his life, he's become kind of a consistent guy. You can count on him for anywhere from 8 to 12 points a game depending on the playing time he gets. So I think it's a pretty good move for the Lakers. At the power forward spot, probably pretty full-ish, but I think they're going to play with small lineups quite a bit and those kind of things and really experiment and try some different stuff this year. So I think he might end up being a kind of a key rotation guy to unlocking some of those small ball lineups.
Yeah, he shot about 40% from three last season. We know this Lakers team needs shooters, so that's a positive sign. He does need a little bit of time, but with LeBron James and Lonzo Ball and Rajon Rondo and all those other pieces on the floor, it would seem likely that he's going to be getting the ball in positive spots for himself where he can actually do what he does best, and that's, of course, score. Now, I did get this question popping up on Twitter a little bit because a lot of people are concerned about the center spot. We'll dig into the financials of the center position in a bit, but we've seen Beasley play the four. Any chance that he can play a small ball center?
Yeah, at this point, the way the NBA is going, I don't see any reason why he can't, especially against backup units. I think he'd be fine as that. I think he would even be fine there in some closing lineups if that's the direction you really wanted to go. I don't, it's a lot of those times you get there and that guy's not a traditional rim protector anymore, and he's not that, and he's never going to be that. So, I don't know any reason why he couldn't. He can hold his own enough on the boards. In the Lakers way they're constructed with LeBron and Brandon Ingram and Lonzo and even Rondo, those guys can all, gang rebound and, do quite a good job themselves on the glass. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he almost in a way transitions into being that kind of backup 5-man and then, see some minutes, potentially even in some closing lineups, depending on how it goes with the other younger options.
Yeah, I dug into his synergy stats, and he actually does a pretty darn good job of defending the pick and roll, particularly if he's matched up with a ball handler. Even if he's switching onto the ball handler, he does well. Where he struggles is when he's off the ball. If he's guarding the roll man, then his defense gets pretty bad. It gets pretty ugly. And we see that as well just when he's off the ball, period. So that's something that Coach Luke Walton is going to have to really work on. You did mention gang rebounding there. The Lakers do have, and they did this last year too. People always complain about Brook Lopez's rebounding, but they were actually a good rebounding team last year because Lonzo Ball, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Josh Hart, now Rondo, players like that tend to dive down in, their guards do, and then hit the boards. And I want to specifically ask you about Rondo because you are a Celtics guy. You watch Rondo quite a bit. What's your take on him, the addition of Rondo to the team? Can he be an impactful piece, or is he just kind of in there to be a veteran mentor right now for Lonzo, and that's about the extent of it?
Yeah, he can definitely be an impactful guy because he was that last year for the New Orleans Pelicans. He was really good. Some of their better lineups were when he was on the court last season. So, he can't shoot. At this point, he's got to be 9-10 years into his career, or gosh, more than that. This is going to be his 13th season. So that just means I'm getting old. But he is, so looking for him to all of a sudden become a shooter, that's not going to happen now. We know that. But one thing he does probably at this point still better than almost anybody who's not Chris Paul is he can control the tempo of a game. If Luke Walton says we need to run and push it, Rondo can do that. If he says slow it down, play it at this pace, Rondo can do that as well. And I think that's going to be something, whether he's the starter or a reserve or playing alongside Lonzo Ball for some minutes, I think that's something Lonzo is really going to learn from Rondo there. Now, as a rebounder, he's always been a good rebounder. He's only 6'1", but this guy gets up on the defensive end, and then he's so sneaky on the offensive end. He loves to come in and poke the ball away from bigs who are kind of unsuspecting or not taking care of the ball the way they should be. It's funny that he's teammates with LeBron because back in the day, he used to get LeBron on that probably at least once or twice a series in the playoffs where LeBron would get it, kind of wind up to throw one of those baseball passes. And next thing you know, Rondo's poked it away and getting his team an extra possession. So I think he's going to be pretty good for them. It's curious to me, as I'm sure it is to you and all the Laker fans out there, how him and Lonzo Ball relationship and playing time and how that's going to work. But I'm not going to freak out about that as much as some others are because I think, Lonzo's probably going to be worked back in a little slowly after the knee surgery. Rondo's there, I think, more at this point in his career to help than he is to say, I got to start, I got to be the man. I think those days have passed for him. I think he just wants to be part of something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. He's at that stage in his career where he understands that it's time for him to be that mentor. And we've seen him do that over the last few years in his career, even when he was with the Chicago Bulls. And there was some, he was butting heads a little bit with their front office and all that kind of stuff. Rondo was talked up by his teammates, by his young teammates, about how well he had done as being a veteran mentor. He also has a 6'9" wingspan. So you mentioned he's only 6'1", but those long arms really, really help him hitting the board. So that's something to consider as well. Because he's got that long wingspan, it's able to allows him to rebound at a higher rate than you would expect for a guy of his size.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's, whether he's in there, one of the things he excels at too, because he's also still, even now going into his 13th year, he's still pretty quick, is he gets in there and he tips the ball away from the bigger guys. And then it might even be a second tip. And then he's the one who hunts it down and goes and collects it, and off he goes. And he also has massive hands for a guy his size. So that allows him to corral some of those balls he might not have got to otherwise.
So when we take a step back and look at this team and the players that the Lakers have added, I mean, Rondo certainly has a long history of some bad behavior, right? He's had some issues with other teams. Of course, we think about his short stint with the Dallas Mavericks and how that wound up. He can be a little bit prickly sometimes. He's not always the easiest person to get along with, although some people do love him. Michael Beasley, same thing. He's got a little bit of a checkered past. Lance Stevenson as well. JaVale McGee has a reputation for doing some questionable things. You've got all of these pieces that the Lakers have added, And I'm starting to see people trying to come up with names for them. Some people are likening them to the Suicide Squad, like this team full of villains that have come together. I've also seen the meme team because they've got all these just kind of odd pieces that you can make memes out of. What's your take on this? I mean, what's the chemistry going to be like, and how hard is Luke Walton's job going to be this season because he's got these, colorful characters that have been added?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I think one of the things we're going to see with this group is we're all going to be watching the guy you didn't mention a lot, who's LeBron, for what his reactions are when some of the quote unquote sillier things are going on.
See if we get another J.R. Smith moment.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to get one of those. Are we just going to get one of those where LeBron, all of a sudden looks like he's, 60 years old and tired and ready to walk away from the game, and there's probably going to be occasionally some of those. But I think what the Lakers did was they said, maybe we're going to go get some of these guys who are a little undervalued, around the league. I think, $9 million for Rondo, I kind of question that. That seems a little excessive, but it is what it is. If you wanted to make sure you got the guy, I can understand that. But it's what's going to be most interesting to me to see is what you mentioned on that chemistry. I think there's times when Luke Walton, despite the fact that he's either the same age or younger than some of the guys he's going to be coaching, he is going to have to be almost like the principal or the teacher and kind of controlling, some of these guys and beyond just the behavioral issues. There's some very strong personalities in that group, so that's going to be really interesting. But I'm also not going to go to the level of where, I've seen, you were mentioning the names, and I hadn't seen the Suicide Squad one. I kind of like that one. But there were a lot of people, I heard a lot of the King and the Court Jesters and those kind of things. And there's going to be silly stuff that happens. They could have just signed JaVale McGee and ensured that was going to go on. But I think what people forget too is when you got a guy like JaVale McGee, over the last 2 years, he's been a key part to the Warriors winning a couple of titles. Rondo and Stevenson, these are veterans who are competitive and they want to win. So it's, while there may be some of these other things, I think that's what's being forgotten a little bit here, is that these are good quality guys who, at the end of the day, what they want to do most is win. It's not necessarily all about, getting theirs or being silly or those kind of things. That's just kind of an offshoot of how it goes with this group.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two things that we have to note here, and that's that not only are these guys now at the latter stages of their career, they're hitting their late 20s or their early 30s. These are guys who have been in the league for a while. And sometimes when you hit that age, you change a little bit. You become a bit more mature than when you were in your early or mid 20s. That's just kind of the way it is. That's the way of the world. We all go through that. And so that's probably going to be a factor here. So you're going to see, and besides that, they're playing with LeBron James. You're probably going to see a more mature version of, say, JaVale McGee, Lance Stevenson, guys like that than you've seen previously. Okay, especially better than their reputations would suggest. Anyway. And then sorry, one thing I want to say too, because I forgot to say it, and you just triggered it with when you mentioned playing with LeBron. The reality is, if this is not working out, none of these guys got more than a 1-year contract. So if it doesn't work out, all it really cost you was some of the Buss family's money. And they're just going to say, all right, well, let's move on. Let's just say Rondo comes in and he clashes with Lonzo Ball and it's causing all kinds of problems and the team doesn't like it. They're just going to say, see you later. They'll eat the $9 million, which if there's any franchise in the league that can eat $9 million, it's the Lakers with relative ease. And they'll just say, it is what it is. We're going to move on from it and then we'll figure it out from there. Now you could go, if you want to rewind it all the way back and say, well, they could have used that $9 million on this guy or broken it up amongst these two guys or whatever. You can do that, but what's done is done. Once moves are done, I prefer to look at it as, all right, what can you do now? And I look at it as the Lakers are really in a no risk situation here with all of these contracts because they can just move on from them if they need to. Exactly. That was going to be my next point. These guys all have tons of reason to be, or millions of dollars, I guess, of reason to be on their best behavior because they're playing for their next contract. And if they continue a reputation of making waves and causing problems, that's not going to look good for them next summer in 2019 when there's even more cap space out there around the league and there's going to be more opportunities for them. So this is an opportunity for them to sort of prove themselves, and the spotlight is going to be on them because not only is it Los Angeles, not only is it the Lakers, but now LeBron James is there. So you know that there's going to be a ton of interest and a ton of opportunities here for them to really show what they are and prove that they are not kind of the knuckleheads that some of them have been made out to be.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm right with you on that one. I think it's definitely an experiment, and we'll I know for being an East Coast guy, I'm excited to see it all play out at, till 1 o'clock in the morning, my time here in the East Coast.
It's must-see TV.
Absolutely. I don't want to pick on your guys there, but when they've been that only late night game, it tends to be the Lakers or the Kings. And there's times when I'm like, I just want to go to bed. Like, this is awful. Yet I got to watch this. And then especially when the Lakers were in that position over the last couple of years where a couple of the younger guys were late season and it's all right, we're going to sit them. Then it became a really tough watch, which obviously, with LeBron in the game and all the rest of the guys, that makes it a much more watchable product, for us here on the East Coast. So I thank them for that at the very least.
Yeah, definitely. They are a extremely watchable team. I mean, there's going to be so many memes, so many little clips of the different things that they do. I mean, JaVale and Lance Stevenson, all these guys. There's going to be some funny moments and hopefully some winning basketball as well. We can keep our fingers crossed. I'm sure with LeBron there, that's going to happen. One other thing that I want to mention before we move on to is that a lot of people are freaking out over, oh my gosh, Lance Stevenson's on the team for this much money and Rondo and McGee and all these guys. But when you look at the way this Lakers team is set up, I don't think they're going to be counted on to play all that many minutes. I mean, sure, they're going to get some minutes off the bench, but if you look at the starting lineup, aside from JaVale McGee, who may start, maybe he doesn't, we'll see. But right now, it's mostly LeBron and the young guys that the Lakers are kind of leaning on. You've got Lonzo Ball, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, guys like Josh Hart, Kyle Kuzma. I think those are the guys they're going to turn to do the heavy lifting. Whereas like the Michael Beasleys and Lance Stevensons and guys like that, those are just going to be the supporting pieces. So it may not even be all that big of a deal. Yes, you want those guys to come in and play well, but you're not bringing in Lance Stevenson saying, hey, we're relying on you to carry us.
Yeah, absolutely. These guys are all somewhere 15, 25 minute a game guys at most. And that's what you're looking at there. There's the supporting players now versus the key rotation players that they, maybe have been at one point in time or another. And it's the other thing that I think is important when you talk about the money. It's important to note that what they did really well was they structured, especially with like Rondo, Stevenson, and Beasley. Those are the mid-range contracts. So let's say the Lakers are playing pretty well and there's somebody out there to go get it, the trade deadline. Those are nice pieces that you can package together and build up your money on the outgoing side very quickly if you need to make a trade. So that's always one of the things you want to keep in mind down the line. This is something that was the Celtics, the team I cover, came up very prominently is Marcus Smart. When he re-signed with Boston, he became their first guy to make between 7 and like 20 million. Because nobody made in that range. And those are the mid-range contracts that you really need to have. And now the Lakers have a handful that they can add together to go get whatever they need if the need should arise down the line in the season. That's really important thing that I think gets overlooked a lot when people just analyze that Rondo got $9 million. Who else was giving him that? Well, you that may be well and true, but you also got to consider from that approach as well.
That's a great point, and that brings me back to a piece that Eric Pincus wrote for Bleacher Report, and he was talking to a Lakers executive, and that executive happened to mention that the roster may not look like it does right now in February. I'm paraphrasing, but they essentially said, we like what we have right now, but the roster may not look the same in February. And of course, February is important because that's when the NBA trade deadline is. So that's a wonderful point there, Keith, is that the Lakers, with all of these one-year contracts, they've got all these expiring deals now that they could package. Let's say the example that we're hearing the most is the Toronto Raptors. If they see the writing on the wall and say, you know what, Kawhi is definitely not staying, maybe they decide to part ways with him, and then maybe the Lakers are able to make a move there. Or who knows, between now and February, who else could hit the market, and they position themselves very well to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to have the pieces in place that when something pops, this is the Daryl Morey theory with James Harden, right? And it's something that Danny Ainge has said multiple times over and over again is you want to have all the pieces in place that when someone comes available that you weren't expecting, you can at least be involved in the conversation. And if you've got, a bunch of the Lakers were really starting to line up to be a bunch of rookie scale guys and minimum guys, and then a couple really expensive guys, then it makes it very hard to put that together. Then you're looking at, all right, if we want to go get a Kawhi Leonard, well, we have to put Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball in the trade, not even from a basketball talent standpoint, but just to make the money work. And now all of a sudden you don't have to do that anymore. Now you've got the other pieces you can put together. And then if one of those guys is the swing piece that allows the deal to be made, well, then you're able to do that versus saying, well, they have to go because that's the only way you can match money. That's one of the things I think gets forgotten. This is I'm very fond of saying, and I've maybe even said it when I've guested on your show before, this is not NBA 2K. You can't turn the salary cap off and force through trades. It doesn't work that way. The cap is a real thing. We all live within the rules of it, and you have to make it work. And now the Lakers are really well positioned to do that.
They are. They're definitely well positioned for the future. And speaking of which, I noticed on Twitter the other day, you were discussing how much cap space the Lakers will have as of right now. If, let's say they make no moves all year and they just let all these contracts expire, what situation are they going to be in financially as far as the cap goes for next summer? What will that be looking like for them? We know that there's some major free agents on the market, guys like Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, possibly Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving. Wouldn't that be something? Kyrie Irving reuniting with LeBron. But yeah, there's some big names out there.
At that point, you guys are going to probably have to just put a full-time detective on staff to find out what things are going on there. But yeah, they're in great shape. We keep talking about it. They really kept the powder dry. Once they didn't get a Paul George or a Kawhi Leonard this summer to go along with LeBron James, they very quickly and smartly pivoted to, all right, let's keep it reasonable where we're going to get good players and not spend a ton of money on these guys. So, if you're looking at it, you got the LeBron, that's the big number, that's 37 plus million. And then after that, for big money on the books, there is not any. The next biggest number is Lonzo Ball at 8.7 and then Brandon Ingram at 7.2. And obviously, I'm assuming they're going to pick up their team options on those guys because they'd be foolish not to. And then it turns into Josh Hart and Kyle Kuzma. 1.9, almost 2 million for those two guys. Then you've got Wagner. He's a little over 2 million. And then the only other guaranteed deal in the book is Isaac Bonga at 1.4.
Well, there's one guy that you're leaving out. I think Lakers fans would prefer to leave him out at this point, and that's Luol Deng.
Yeah, so my assumption with Luol Deng is I don't like to make the assumption that they're going to salary dump him or trade him anywhere because those are more complicated than I think people give it credit for being. But what I did factor into my projection for the Lakers is that they'll waive and stretch him because I can't see any reason they're going to let that 18 plus million sit on the books for next year. So that's my projection for now. They would love to just dump that contract on somebody and say, see you later. Look, now we're good. We're free and clear of it. But I've got that factored in that they waive and stretch him. And then I've got, a draft pick cap hold in there for later in the draft. It's tough to find a model you like, so I just kind of this very early stage use some of the Vegas odds sites. So that's like a mid-20s ish draft pick is what most of them seem to have settled on. So I've got the Lakers coming in at $35.8 million in cap space, which is enough money to go get that second max free agent, whether that be a straight up signing or to package that together and trade. Now to get there, like I said, you got to waive and stretch Deng, and then that's renouncing all those 1 year free agents. So Caldwell Pope, McGee, Rondo, Stevenson, Beasley. And then I also have them not non-tendering Zubac. So that gets them, where they need to be with that. But that's just the projection right now that can and will change, as we get in season here and we see what everything looks like. But that's the direction I think is most likely, here at the tail end of July for the Lakers, a little less than a year from now.
I've heard, and that's an awesome projection. I think that's right on the money as far as what they would do as of right now. Of course, that can change between now and then, but I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, the cap is going up. But I think what a lot of people forget, and you can probably speak to this, Keith, is that now the max contracts are tied to a percentage of the salary cap space. So if the cap goes up to, I believe it's 107 million next year, or maybe it's 108, one or the other.
109.
109. Okay, I was short on,
yeah,
on
that's
both
the
of them.
latest projection. Yep.
109, but the max contract amount is going to go up as well. So it's going to be proportional. So when you're looking at the Lakers and you're thinking, oh, you've got, Lonzo, you've got Brandon Ingram, you've got all those guys. Well, their money's going to go up next summer. They're going to be making more. You add all those up. LeBron's going to make more next summer. They all have raises. When you add all that up, plus you factor in that a max contract next summer is going to be a little bit more than a max contract would be this summer. That kind of eats up any of the extra space that the Lakers would have by the cap going up.
Yeah, you're spot on with it. That's exactly, because it's not the way it used to be, back before this CBA came in, where the max tiers were set at an amount. And that's what it was. Now they're 25, 30, and 35% of the cap. So at $109 million cap, the highest tier level, that's the 10 plus year experience level, that's $38.2 million. Middle tier 32.7, low tier 27.3. So that's really where you're at. But the Lakers, what you want to do is you want to be able to get yourself easily without this complicated mess, of which is what I think happened last year. Fans are like, well, if we do this, and this, and then also do these complicated deals where somehow we move Luol Deng for no money at all, we can get to this number. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not true. It is true, but that's really complicated. This coming summer, the Lakers don't have to involve another team at all to get to enough money to have max cap space, which I think is, really where you want to be and be positioned. And in addition, it doesn't cost them anything as far as trading a player or attaching an asset to a contract like Luol Deng's. They can get there without having to do that and keep really the core team of LeBron and all the kids together, which is, I think, the hope going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And it certainly helps, too, in leverage for trade discussions. I mean, we saw earlier this summer, just a few weeks ago, the San Antonio Spurs were trying to leverage LeBron's opt-in or opt-out date for the Lakers to make a trade for Kawhi, saying, hey, you need Kawhi in order to get LeBron. And then when that didn't happen, suddenly the Spurs leverage goes away. When you're going into trade discussions, if teams know you have to trade Luol Deng in order to get a max salary slot, they're going to use that to their advantage, and they're going to hold it over the Lakers' heads. So being in a position where they have the ability to get there without anyone else's help is really important for not just being able to make that move, but also in their future trade discussions this season.
Yeah, I asked a handful of teams in Las Vegas. I said, did you have any discussion about, picking up Luol Deng's deal? Really, it was the teams we knew had cap space. And the thing I got back was, we had some cursory discussion on eating that contract, which, kind of refresher would have been $18 million for this season and $18.8 million for next year. And I said, well, what were you asking for? And they said, we wanted one of Ingram, Ball, Hart, at a minimum, Kuzma, and we wanted another first round pick, or give us two kids and no pick, or two first round picks, but the two first round picks, that was a little less desirable for those teams because those are going to be late 20s picks. Right. Just any team with LeBron, that's where you're going to be. So it really turned into, you were giving up at least one of the kids plus a first round pick or two of the kids. And that was just to get off Deng's money. And at that point, that's where you said it. Those teams had all the leverage. It's, hey, we know what you're trying to do. It's whether it was because Magic Johnson broadcasted to the world every opportunity he had of the players he liked, or whether it was because we're not idiots and we know where they were trying to go. Teams were very much saying, hey, we've got you. Either pay up or figure it out yourselves. And I think, for my personal opinion, I think the Lakers made the exact right move to not do that, because we saw Paul George either change his mind or just notch into, if maybe the Lakers were never a consideration for him really at all, but stayed in OKC. And then the Spurs are asking an exorbitant price to trade him within the conference. And I think the Lakers made the right move to say, you know what, without something firm agreed to and in hand, there's no reason for us to make one of these other moves. If you had one of those, that starts to feel a little different. Then maybe you start making some different decisions. But instead, like I said before, they pivoted and went and made the best of it as they could.
Agreed. Yeah, now they're in a position where they can keep all of their assets and potentially still land that max player. They just have to wait a year to do it, and that's the trade-off they were willing to make. Let's talk about this Luol Deng contract real quick, because going back to that Eric Pincus piece on Bleacher Report, there was a line in there that raised some eyebrows. A Lakers executive says that Luol Deng is semi-retired, and that his mind can change about that, but that they're not really expecting him back on the floor. So I had a bunch of people on Twitter asking me, what does this do to his contract? Can they get him off the books? What happens there? So Keith, can you enlighten us, fill us in on how retirement would work for Luol Deng, or how the whole situation is going to play out?
Yeah, let's be really clear. Semi-retired is not retired. Retired would mean he is done. That he has said, I'm out the door and this is it. And there's a couple different ways that a retirement can be done. There's a clause or a provision in the CBA where a player can just say, I'm done and I'm giving it all back. I don't want the money I'm owed or anything like that. And then there are other things where the player can retire and they can then be waived and waived and then bought out, or and get the number lowered, or waived and stretched, which would lower the number but drag it over a certain number of years left. We saw two recent examples of this. Was Rasheed Wallace retired from the Boston Celtics, and he took a lesser amount of money but still wanted some of the money they owed him, and that money sat on the Celtics books for a year. Tim Duncan, he retired, and then the Spurs chose to, that's fine, we're going to pay you the amount we had agreed on, but they stretched it over a handful of years. So that opportunity exists. I don't know Luol Deng's mindset. I don't know where he's really at. I would find it very hard to believe that he would give back much, if any, of almost $37 million over the next 2 years. Maybe he would. Maybe he would do that, and there's always that opportunity of hey, and then we'll hire you as an executive on a 20-year contract at $2 million a year. Those things can happen, and they do happen. And I'm not suggesting the Lakers would be violating any kind of CBA or should be punished if they do that, because that every team does forms and fashions of that. But at this point it's $18 million on the books this year and $18.81 million next year, and nobody should think of that number as any differently until you're given a reason to think of it differently, despite if they say semi-retired, retired, or whatever. I mean, Kendrick Perkins was semi-retired and signing contracts late into the last two seasons, so it's he's still on the roster, still on the books, and still sitting there at almost $39 million.
Right, yeah. So that's not going to go anywhere unless his mindset changes. If Luol Deng suddenly decides, oh my gosh, the Lakers are going to do the exact same thing as last year, where they're just not going to play me, I'm going to sit all year, and I feel like I still have something left, then maybe there's some incentive for him to give back some money in order to get to another team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If Luol Deng is, I want to play, and right now, gosh, all right, let's assume he's a 3-4. He's probably more 4 than 3 at this point, but he's somewhere between 3rd, 4th, 5th on the depth chart at both of those positions. And the reality is, I would be surprised if he ever plays another meaningful minute for the Lakers. It means at that point, I think something went really wrong for Los Angeles if that happens. But what you're really, I think, looking at with Luol Deng is you're going to come back and hopeful, maybe Tibbs does want to bring him in to Chicago, and if he does, play him 30 minutes a game, because nobody plays less than 30 minutes a game for Tibbs.
Recreate the Chicago Bulls in Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, he's just licking his chops, waiting for Deng to get bought out and Joakim Noah, and then he can get it all cranked up. But it's but let's say that does exist, or there is another team that says, hey, we'll actually play you. Then he may go to the Lakers and say, hey, of this $37 million I still owe you, I'll give back 15 million of it, or half of it, or 20 or 10 or whatever the number is. And there's probably a number where I would imagine the Lakers are comfortable saying, all right, that works for us. But as it stands right now, because he's going to turn into an expiring contract, really the minute we hit the trade deadline, because this year's at that point, any money on the books this year is pretty much done. his salary number becomes a very nice piece for the Lakers to have, where they could move some things around because it's all fully guaranteed. So you're not running into only this much of it counts and this much of it doesn't. You can really start to move money around, and that starts to become, a nice trade piece. And for a team who would be acquiring him with the idea of, we're going to get him and wipe him off the books, aka what the Atlanta Hawks did with Carmelo Anthony. It's, hey, we took it on. We got a couple assets that we like in terms of players, and we got a pick we really like, and now we can get this thing moving in the direction we want to go. That's kind of what Deng becomes, but even to a almost better standpoint for the Lakers, because it's not quite as much bad money on the books.
Right. So there's that to factor in as well, that next summer they're not going to be nearly as desperate to move his contract or it's not going to cost as much to move his contract, I should say, because he'll be expiring. So that's going to be to their advantage. And perhaps they just wait out the year and they bite the bullet. They pay him the $18 million this season. Probably don't see him on the floor at all. I would imagine that if he could still play at a high level, we probably would have seen it towards the end of last season when the injuries started piling up, but that didn't happen. So there's no guarantee right now that he can play at an NBA level anymore. We haven't seen it in a year. So yeah, I mean, they could wind up just kind of hanging on to that deal for one more summer or one more season and then parting with him next summer. And that seems to be the route things are going, or the way things are looking right now anyway.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. I think it'll be that 18 just sits on the books this whole year. Maybe something comes up that's really unexpected mid-season where you can use that in a trade and make it work. But if not, it just sits there. And, and I'm right with you. I don't think you ever see him on the floor again. And then next year, that $18.8 million, that either becomes a tradable piece. I mean, gosh, we Timofey Mozgov got traded 3 times this offseason, so we know that can be done, or I guess 3 times in the last couple of years, whatever it is. But we know that can happen. But what we would see with Deng then is they'll try to do what they can to get it off the books, and then I think when it comes down to it, if there's nothing there and they are free agent X is there that needs that full max contract, all right, we're done. We're going to wave and stretch this guy and off we go. Or at that point, they could say, all right, we will pay, whether it be one of the kids or we'll be a draft pick to get a team to eat this deal. And there's going to be a handful of teams sitting around waiting that say, oh, yeah, we'll take that. Or it could even be an established player who's under contract who wants a new team. That $18.8 million, which is expiring, becomes a really nice piece to move in that trade, especially as you start to build up towards salary matching. So there's a lot of options to go forward with it. It's not as as you said, it's not as desperate as it was this year. And that's why, again, I think the Lakers made the really smart move of they really kind of held their cards until, all right, you know what, we don't need to do anything with it. So we're just going to hang on to it and see where it goes.
Right. So let's wrap up with this. Obviously, the Lakers will see what happens with Luol Deng, probably move him next summer. We'll see some sort of resolution with his deal before then. But one of the things that really struck me for this summer when I was looking at the Lakers financials is the center position. There's been a lot of kind of hand-wringing amongst Lakers Nation that they don't really have a solid center rotation. A lot of people were expecting Brook Lopez to come back. They certainly had the money to bring him back, but it appears they elected not to do that, or maybe he didn't want to come back. We're not sure on that. They also elected to let Julius Randle walk away. So right now, by my figures, and this is off the top of my head, so listeners, if I'm off on this a little bit, don't kill me for this, but I believe the Lakers are spending less money on the center position this year than any other team in the league. They're at $4.8 million, so less than 5% of their cap space is being spent on the center position. Is there anything we can take away from that, Keith, or anything that you think would be important to note with that number? Because it does stand out to me.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you can look at there, and if you really wanted to go even more extreme, I know there's a lot of people around the league who they don't see Mo Wagner as even a center. They see him more as a stretch 4 than they do as a 5. I think that's kind of quibbling there a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things where I think those positions in a lot of ways, the 4 and the 5, are kind of becoming intertwined and combined for a lot of teams. I know a lot of teams now, they just consider them bigs. They don't don't even, have a designation, if you will, on it. But I think what you look at and say is it shows center position, unless you have a true backbone of the defense, rim protector type, a Rudy Gobert or even a Hassan Whiteside, guys like that. Or they are just a dominant offensive player like a Joel Embiid or a DeMarcus Cousins if he's healthy. There's just no reason to spend money on that position. You can get similar type production out of a handful of guys that you're going to cycle through for a total of $4 to $6 million as you would getting the one big time guy to bring him in and lock all that down. And that's, had they done that with Brook Lopez, then you don't have Michael Beasley. And, maybe that's fine. I don't know. It is what it is. But I think they really like JaVale McGee. I think he gives them that, shot blocker, rim protector that they wouldn't have had otherwise. I know they want to find minutes for Wagner, which because of other positions on the team, that probably does come at the 5. And I know they still like Zubac quite a bit. So, at that point, you're really starting to crowd things. And guys, that's when it all of a sudden gets – guys are not as motivated when there's no chance of playing time coming their way. And I think what ends up happening there is it becomes a lot of, how do we get, into a position, to get production out of this, but do we need to spend a lot of money on it? I don't think we need to anymore. And I think the Lakers really kind of read that market correctly of let's just put our money into other positions on the floor instead.
Yeah, it's striking. It's amazing how far the league has come in such a short amount of time. You think it wasn't all that long ago that you had to have a center. In fact, I guess it was some time ago with Shaquille O'Neal, but you think about how many teams loaded up on guys that are just big bodies that didn't necessarily have that much in terms of basketball skill to offer, but just big bodies to throw at players like Shaq. And now we're seeing teams you've got the Lakers who have historically had amazing centers spending less than 5% of their salary cap on true centers. It's amazing how far it's come. And it's a little bit startling when you really stop and you think about where we're at right now in NBA basketball.
Yeah, it really is. I grew up on the NBA in the 80s and early 90s. And for me, it was everybody had a center and you didn't win if you didn't have a center. It was one of those things. It's you mentioned when Shaq came in, but preceding him, it was, Patrick Ewing and Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson. And then it became, all right, now we got to deal with the Shaq kid. And then, on the heels of those guys, it was just, there was always somebody. And then, in a lot of ways, one of the things I think that, was really interesting and fun was when the Spurs drafted Tim Duncan, they really said, you know what, we can just turn this guy into a power forward. And it was because he could defend anybody at that point in his career. A lot of people remember now the guy who could, barely run and jump. But when he was younger, he could really get out there and defend on the perimeter and do everything he needed to do. They went dual bigs for a while, and then that became kind of, maybe that's what we need to do. And now it's transitioned into maybe we don't need any. And what has me really excited is all these stories now that we're starting to hear, and whether they're coming from the team or it's just speculation of, hey, maybe LeBron will close games at the 5. And there's LeBron can play any position he wants on the court. He's just, people ask, what's his position? Basketball player. That's what he is. So but that has me super excited. I start to look at, geez, could you have a lineup of, LeBron and Kuzma, Ingram, Hart, and Ball? Really LeBron and the 4 kids like that closes games, and that would have me thrilled if I was a Lakers fan, and I would hope I would get to see some of that. And if you've spent a lot of money on a center, you might not do that just out of the sense of, hey, if we're paying this guy $5 million or $8 million or even $10 million, hey, we got to use them. We can't necessarily just, drop them off in the corner here and say, play this way. So I think it's another read of who was there to spend the money on. And also, not to kind of beat this dead horse of a point, but I'm probably going to do it, is, again, if it's really we need to go get a center, well, there's multiple ways they can go make that happen, and they'll go do that if that's what they really need to do. But I think it's more of a read of, hey, we might not need this. So let's start to position the team in a much more modern way.
Yeah, it does appear that their death lineup, to steal a phrase from the Warriors, their death lineup is going to be, like you said, it's going to be Lonzo and Hart and Kuzma and Ingram and then LeBron out there. So he would be the de facto 5. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting to see because it looks like the Lakers have, again, set themselves up to play at an extremely fast pace. And you're right. If they do need to go get a center, if they realize, hey, it's just not working, we're too small, we've gone too far in this direction, I don't think that's going to happen. But if it goes that way, then there are options out there on the market. They could go land as just a stopgap to kind of fill in for a year before they regroup next season. So lots of flexibility for the Lakers and some really exciting, interesting lineups that they can play with here. Well, Keith, you know what? I think we've gone over a ton here. I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks so much for spending the time and going over all the particulars of the salary cap and everything else that we've been discussing here.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. It's anything we can do to continue to build that bridge between Celtics and Lakers fans, and until they inevitably meet in the finals, then we can all go back to hating each other. But until that point, there's no reason we can't all be friends.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? I'm ready for it. As much as the Lakers love to hate the Celtics and Celtics love to hate the Lakers, those are the best times when it's Lakers versus Celtics in the finals. I hope it happens again soon.
It's and now we're gonna have 28 other teams angry at us, but it's in their fans. But it really is what the NBA to me always feels like it's supposed to be. That's what I grew up on, and it was one of those things when I was a kid. In the Celtics in the 80s were making their runs twice. They got there, and the Lakers didn't get there, and it was you almost felt robbed, of what was there. And I go back to when they played in was it 2008 and 2010? Like that's again that feels like what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be those two teams, and I like when the Lakers are good and the Knicks are good and the Celtics and the Bulls and the kind of traditional powerhouse teams. That's when I think the league is at its best. So I'm really hoping it all kind of comes together the way we're hoping here, and we see this thing link up down the line, and within the next few years. That'd be a lot of fun.
It sure would be. Of course, we're going to have to slay the Golden State Warriors dragon before we can get to that point. That's not going to be easy, but yeah, it certainly would be nice to see again. Guys, make sure you head over to Twitter and follow Keith. Follow him at Keith Smith NBA. Does a great job breaking down the salary cap and everything else NBA related you need to know. So again, make sure you check him out at Keith Smith NBA, and of course, you can find his work on Real GM as well as CelticsBlog.com. That's going to do it. 100th episode in the books. Exciting summer for the Lakers. We'll continue with weekly episodes as we get closer to the start of the regular season, which is going to be coming up. We'll be in training camp before we know it in September. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Trevor_Lane. And of course, find my work at LakersNation.com, which is your home for everything Lakers. Till next time, see ya.